So if you wanted to publish in the top journals, or any journal that's respectable in the field really, this is the whole process that a paper goes through. So there is a lot more to it than just writing your paper. So one of the most important aspects is, where do I publish? Now, a few hundred years ago, that was easy. There were only a few journals. Nowadays, so a few hundred years ago, when it started in 1665, 2 journals were started. These were the first international peer-reviewed journals. The first one was the Journal of the French Academy of Sciences, published on the 6th of January 1665 for the first time. 2 months later, the Royal Society of London published its first issue of the journal, called the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society of London. 2 journals at that point. At the moment, we're up, this is 2005, in 2014 there were more than 28,000 journals. There's no way that you can get to know all of them. There's no way that you can easily find all of them, and that's why journal selection is so important. Each journal, so it's actually different. Many of these journals have slightly overlapping aims and scope, slightly overlapping readership. In a way that's good, because if your paper is rejected by one journal, you can go to another journal, perhaps, and have it published there. You have roughly the same readership, so that makes things easier. But sometimes it's very difficult to differentiate between the different journals, because they're all so similar. And so it's how do I then select the most appropriate journal for my research? Before I go there, I would like to share with you a document that I was thinking of last night when I looked through this presentation, and I was thinking I should share with you something very special. And something very special is this document. You can see it's from the 1st of March 1664. This is from the minutes, that's the report of a meeting at the Royal Society of London, in the UK at the time, of course, where, and this is handwritten as you can see, where they first said that they ordered that the philosophical transactions be composed by the secretary, Mr. Oldenburg of the Royal Society, printed every Monday, blah, blah, blah. Every paper had to be first revised by some of the members of the Royal Society. So this is the first time ever in history that people refer to peer review. Before that, there was no peer review, no formal peer review. The Royal Society was the journal of the Royal Society, the Philosophical Transactions, was the very first journal that published peer-reviewed articles. This is a very special document. It's not available anywhere. It comes from the archives of the Royal Society. I happen to be writing in my other career as an academic at Peking University. I happen to be writing a book about the historical aspect, and I wanted to say something about publication, the history of publication. And so I actually got this document from the Royal Society directly. So you will be able to get copies of this presentation afterwards from Inago by email, but I'm not allowed to share this document with you. I just wanted to show it to you because it's a very, very special historical document. Coming back to the journals, so yes, by 2015 we had more than 28,000 peer-reviewed English language journals, lots of them. Unfortunately, in the last decade or so, many unscrupulous business people have jumped onto this bandwagon and decided to, because it's easy now on the internet, to publish, in quotes, publish their own journals, charge authors sometimes quite high fees for the work that is presumably done by these journals, and then publish the papers without any changes. These journals that exist just for the sake of making money for their owners are called predatory journals. They don't give you any academic credit whatsoever. So it's really, really bad to publish in them. If you've been unfortunate enough to have published a paper in such a journal, first, it's unlikely that that journal will retract your paper from its website, and that means that you cannot submit that same paper to a better, more respected journal. It stays there forever, and you don't get any credit for that amount of work. So be very careful in selecting the right journal, avoid falling into the trap of these predatory publishers. And here, there are some numbers here, but the point is, this is 2014, sorry, it's 2016, 2015, 2014, 2013, and here we go up this is 1,000. So you can see it goes up quite dramatically over time. We'll talk about predatory journals somewhat later this morning. So selecting the right journal for your research is hard. And it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. We will, in the next few slides, we will discuss a number of factors that are important to the process of journal selection, and we will discuss some important tips and tools that will help you select the ideal journal for your next publication. So, these factors act like a magnet. So we'll try and help you find that needle in the haystack. So, first of all, you've done your research, you know what you want to say to your colleagues out there internationally, hopefully, but then you need to find a journal that has the right aims and scope for your article to go through the peer review process as smoothly as possible. Well, there are different types of research articles first, and there are in essence 4 different types of research articles. We have your regular original research articles. These are the bread and butter of research. You do your work, you write it up, you submit it to a journal, and eventually after peer review, hopefully it gets published. That's your regular journal article, and most of you will be writing such articles to start with. Now sometimes you might have a very exciting result that you want the community to be aware of as soon as possible. What you need is a journal that will allow you to publish this rapidly. Now usually, such rapid publications tend to be short by their very nature. And these are called letters or communication to the editor or something like that. A few slides ago, we watched this video issued by Nature. Most of the articles in Nature are actually letters. And I've been very lucky over the course of my career to have published a number of letters in Nature. And it's a headache actually to get published in Nature because it goes to a lot of reviewers. They are very, very picky, very critical. You have to address all of their issues, and you have to convince the editor that what you have found is really exciting, and it's exciting not just for your own field, but for many, many scientists in other fields as well. So publishing in Nature is a great achievement, but it's very difficult, and it really causes grey hair. It's really hard. So these are letters. Then we have, mostly in the medical fields, but also in economics and fields like that, we can publish case reports. These are also peer-reviewed. And then the big articles you probably use for your literature survey in your research article are the review articles. Review articles are often written by authors on invitation from journals. You don't set out to write a review article without being asked by an editor. It's not very useful to do that. Some of the maybe not so high impact factor journals will allow you to submit a review article and they'll be happy with it, but the top journals will commission review articles. They will ask you if you are of sufficiently high standing, you have a track record of publications in your field, and the audience of the journal might be interested in hearing your views of what's happening in that field. So these are the higher level articles. Right. So here's a checklist. So once you've done your research and you are looking for a journal, these are the questions you would like to ask yourself. Is the journal niche? So does it address a very small fraction of the research environment? Is it really specialized? Or is it generic? So the journal I work for, the Astrophysical Journal Letters, from its name, you can already tell it's quite niche. It's astrophysics, right? It's not broad. But Nature or Science, on the other hand, they cover all of science. So that's generic. Does the journal accept theoretical or applied research, or is it only basic science, blue skies research? Is it an authentic open access journal. We'll talk about open access later this morning, but there is a new trend now in the publishing industry that the author can pay for their article to be published so that it becomes accessible immediately to anyone who wants to read it. That's usually on the internet. That's called open access. There are different flavors of open access, and we'll talk about them in just a moment. But as I mentioned before, given the fact it's so easy to publish articles on the internet, many of these predatory publishers that we talked about will also offer open access publication, and those are to be avoided. If it's an open access journal, it will ask you to pay a fee for the publication. The reason for that is that these publishers have staff, editorial staff, that run the journal, that make sure that all submissions are sent to editors and sent to peer reviewers, and you get it back, and it's a whole administrative process. That administrative process requires manpower, personnel, and these people need to get paid a salary, right? So you have to pay article processing charges, or APCs, to publish in open access journals. You want to know what is the manuscript word limit? Coming back to Nature, for instance, a letter in Nature requires a maximum, allows a maximum of 3,500 words, no more. The abstract, the first paragraph of the Nature article, cannot be longer than 250 words. So there are all these specific rules. You cannot have more than 50 references. In regular research journals, often there are no such restrictions. If you ever look at review articles, and you probably will do so when you prepare your own literature survey, you will see review articles with hundreds of citations, hundreds of references. Right? And then, so a few more requirements. Are there any other specific formatting requirements? So, in order to know how to put your article together, have a look at what we call the instructions for authors. Every single journal on its website has instructions for authors. And every single journal has slightly different requirements. So while it might be very boring to read those instructions for authors, it's crucial that you do so when you start writing. Because if you don't follow the instructions for authors carefully, it may well be that the editor then says, well, you haven't followed the instructions, this paper will not be considered for peer review. It will be rejected. Right? So follow the instructions in order to stand a better chance of having your paper eventually accepted, or at least send it out, having it sent out for peer review. Sometimes there are restrictions on numbers of figures or tables. The letters journal I work for has a maximum of 4 of those, figures, tables, or a combination. What is the preferred format for figures? For a long time we only used to accept PostScript as a format. That's very outdated. These days we accept JPEG or PDF as well, and so journals may have certain requirements for your figure formats. What is the number of citations, references accepted? I talked about that just briefly. And what is the preferred citation style? That's an important one as well. Very often, or not very often, but maybe once every 5 or 6 submissions, we get a paper submitted to our journal that doesn't use the standard way of citing references. The standard way in my field is that you refer to an article as author A and author B in between brackets 1999. And that's the Harvard style. But sometimes we get papers submitted to us that use endnotes. So superscripts, numbers 1, 2, 3, etc., with references at the end, or numbers in between square brackets. What that tells us as editors immediately is that this paper has been submitted to another journal where it was rejected. That gives you already a bit of a disadvantage in the eyes of the editor, because the editor then knows that your paper was deemed not to be good enough for another journal, so why should I accept it in my journal? Right? Follow the referencing style imposed by the journal. Again, look at some recent papers published in that particular journal and read the instructions for authors. So here are my tips. Look at a number of recently published papers to understand the requirements. Read the sections about the journal and aims and scope to check if the scope of the journal covers your research area. I'll get back to that in a moment. Ensure that you check the instructions for authors prior to submitting your manuscript. Very important here. It often happens that people submit their articles to our journal without adding a cover letter. But this is your chance, by including a cover letter, this is your chance of making clear to the editor why this particular article deserves publication in your journal. Right? Because that's where you can make the case, well, the aims and scope of my paper match those of the journal for the following reasons. And don't worry, it's fine. Editors read these cover letters and they actually like getting cover letters like that because that will help them make a decision what to do with your submission. So don't forget to write a good cover letter, make a convincing case for publication of your article in the journal you have targeted. The other thing I talked about just a little bit ago is how do we make sure that our papers get read by the right audience. So you have to make a choice here between journals that are very broad in their scope and journals that are quite specialized or niche. It is a comparison between the Olympics, for instance, on the left-hand side here, where we have almost all sports involved, or looking just at Wimbledon, the tennis championships just outside of London that are currently taking place actually this week and last week. So obviously broad scope journals have a wide exposure to lots and lots of different people in lots and lots of different fields, not just your own field. They tend to also generate higher citation rates, which is good for your career, but there is much more competition to get into them, and usually that means there is a lower acceptance rate. Coming back to Nature, I happen to know the astronomy editor of Nature quite well, also because of my professional links, and he tells me that of every 100 articles submitted to Nature Astronomy, in astronomy, 90 get rejected immediately. 90% gets rejected at the time of submission. That's called a desk rejection. Of the remaining 10% that are sent out for peer review, half get rejected after peer review. So that means that out of every 100 submissions, only 5 make it into the journal. So your chances of success are low, and that's why you should actually compose a carefully worded cover letter and write your article in such a way that it is compelling, convincing, and exciting. Now, having said that, in my field, Nature is actually not considered one of the top journals because we call Nature the journal of wrong results. But that's just in my field because it turns out most of the astronomy papers turn out to be wrong. And I'm guilty of that myself. We had a Nature letter 2 years ago by one of my graduate students, and in the past 2 years we have found out that some of the work that we published was just wrong. Yeah, well, too bad. Still, the graduate student got a Nature paper, which was good for his career. So that's the other side of it.